I'm Megan, 32, and I never thought I'd be hiding in my own bathroom, trying not to hyperventilate while my estranged mother pounded on the door outside. "I know you make six figures now," she'd screamed moments earlier. "Your brother needs a new car and I need money for the house. Family helps family." 5 years of no contact shattered in an instant. Through the crack in the door, I could see my brother Tyler smugly leaning against the doorframe, already counting money that wasn't his. My cousin Stephanie was the only one who knew about my promotion. What they didn't know was that I had already made plans for every cent of my money, and none of it involved them. I still can't believe this is happening right now. Before I continue with how this nightmare unfolded, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? If you've ever had family members suddenly reappear when money is involved, hit that like button. And if you want to see how I handled these entitled relatives who thought my success meant their payday, subscribe to join our community of people who've learned the hard way that sometimes the deepest betrayals come from those who share your DNA. To understand why my mother showing up at my doorstep sent me into a panic attack, you need to know about my childhood. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents divorced when I was 8, and my father moved to Arizona shortly after. He'd send the occasional birthday card but was mostly absent from my life. This left me with my mother, Elaine, and my younger brother Tyler, who's 4 years younger than me. From as early as I can remember, the dynamic in our house was clear. Tyler was the golden child, and I was the family workhorse. When Tyler wanted the newest PlayStation, Mom found a way to buy it. When I needed new clothes for school, I got hand-me-downs from our cousin Stephanie. "Boys need more stimulation," my mother would explain dismissively. "You're naturally more responsible." This responsibility translated to me working part-time jobs from age 14. My first job was at the local grocery store, bagging items for neighbors who'd sometimes look at me with pity. I'd hand over almost every paycheck to my mother for household expenses, while Tyler was encouraged to focus on football. "Tyler has potential for a scholarship," she'd say. "Your job is to help support the family until he makes it big." The irony was that I was the one with the straight A's, the one taking AP classes and joining academic clubs that could actually lead to college scholarships. I still remember the day I won the regional science fair in 10th grade. I came home excited, certificate in hand, only to find my mother fawning over Tyler's participation trophy from a football tournament his team had lost. "That's nice, Megan," she said without looking at my award. "Did you pick up milk like I asked? Tyler needs protein for his recovery." My grandmother, my father's mother, was the only one who seemed to value my achievements. She lived 3 hours away, but whenever she visited, she'd slip me $20 and whisper, "Save this for college, smarty pants." Those small gestures of support were lifelines in a household where I constantly felt invisible unless chores needed doing or bills needed paying. Stephanie, my cousin on my mother's side, witnessed much of this growing up. 3 years older than me, she lived just a few blocks away and would often be at our house. I thought she understood the unfairness of it all. We'd talk late into the night when she stayed over, and I'd confide in her about how it felt to be the family afterthought. She'd nod sympathetically and say things like, "Aunt Elaine definitely plays favorites." I trusted her with my feelings, my dreams, my plans to someday build a life far from the toxic environment of our family. I never imagined she'd be the one to eventually betray that trust. By the time I was 17, I was working 30 hours a week at the grocery store and another 10 babysitting, all while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. My mother took at least half of everything I earned. Meanwhile, Tyler had flunked algebra twice and was on academic probation, but still got a car for his 16th birthday, a car I often ended up having to put gas in. "Your brother needs reliable transportation for sports," my mother explained when I questioned this obvious injustice. "You're good at saving money. You can buy your own car someday." That someday never came, at least not while I lived under her roof. Every time I got close to saving enough, some family emergency would arise that required my savings. Tyler needed sports equipment. The house needed repairs. Mom needed dental work. The pattern was always the same: Tyler's needs and my mother's needs came first. Mine weren't even on the list. What hurt most wasn't the financial burden but the emotional one. The constant message that I somehow mattered less. That my achievements were expected while Tyler's mediocrity was celebrated. That my role was to give while Tyler's was to take. These lessons shaped me in ways I wouldn't fully understand until years of therapy later, creating a deep-seated belief that I had to earn love through sacrifice and service, and that my own needs and wants were selfish indulgences. Despite all this, or perhaps because of it, I became fiercely independent and determined. Each slight fueled my resolve to create a different future for myself. Each dismissal of my accomplishments made me work harder to prove my worth, not to them anymore, but to myself. Each dollar my mother took from my paycheck was a reminder of the financial independence I was determined to achieve. What my mother didn't realize was that she was teaching me exactly what kind of person I didn't want to become. And she was giving me all the motivation I would ever need to break free from the toxic cycle of our family. Getting to college was my escape plan. From freshman year of high school, I researched scholarship opportunities obsessively. I joined every club that might look good on applications. I studied for the SAT using borrowed prep books because my mother refused to pay for a course like the one Tyler would later take, and then skip half the sessions of. When acceptance letters started arriving senior year, my mother's response was predictable: "Who's going to help around the house if you leave? How will we manage without your contribution to the bills?" I'd been accepted to several state schools, but my dream offer came from Northwestern University in Chicago, a prestigious school with a partial academic scholarship. Even with the scholarship, the remaining cost was daunting. When I showed my mother the financial aid package, she laughed. "We can't afford that. You can go to community college like Tyler plans to." But I had prepared for this response. For 2 years, I'd been secretly saving a portion of my earnings in a bank account my mother didn't know about. I'd applied for every scholarship possible and had been awarded several smaller ones that, combined with my hidden savings, federal loans, and work-study opportunities, would make Northwestern possible, barely, but possible. The night I announced I was accepting Northwestern's offer, my mother didn't speak to me for a week. Tyler called me selfish. But for the first time, I chose myself, and the feeling was both terrifying and exhilarating. Those first months at Northwestern were a revelation. I was surrounded by people who valued education and ambition. My roommate Rachel came from a loving family that called her daily just to check in, not to demand money. The contrast with my own family dynamics was stark and sometimes painful. The calls from home started about 3 weeks into my first semester. "The refrigerator broke. I need $400 for a new one. Tyler's car needs repairs. Can you send $350? I'm short on the electric bill this month. I need $200 by Friday." Each time, I'd feel that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. The programming ran deep: family helps family. I sent money I couldn't spare during those first 2 years, taking on extra work-study hours and eating ramen to make up the difference. Meanwhile, Tyler had dropped out of community college after 1 semester, claiming it wasn't for him. He moved back home where my mother continued to support him while simultaneously demanding my financial contribution from hundreds of miles away. The turning point came during my junior year. I developed severe abdominal pain one night and ended up in the emergency room with appendicitis. When I called my mother from the hospital, her response changed everything. "I can't come up there now, Megan. Tyler has a big game this weekend." Tyler, who had recently joined a local amateur football league, apparently took priority over my emergency surgery. I hung up the phone and cried in the pre-op room, alone and scared. Rachel, after hearing what happened, skipped 2 days of classes to stay with me in the hospital and help me home afterward. "That's not what family does," she said firmly when I tried to thank her. "Your mother's behavior isn't normal, Megan. It's not okay." That hospital stay became my moment of clarity. As I recovered in my dorm room, I made 2 decisions: I would stop sending money home, and I would create strong boundaries with my mother and Tyler going forward. The guilt was overwhelming at first. The manipulative phone calls increased. The accusations of abandonment and selfishness became more vicious. But with each passing month of holding my ground, I grew stronger. By senior year, contact had dwindled to occasional tense phone calls. I graduated with honors, with Rachel and my academic advisor cheering me on from the stands. No one from my family attended. My first job offer came from a marketing firm in downtown Chicago. The entry-level salary wasn't impressive, but it was mine, earned through my own hard work. I found a tiny studio apartment with a reasonable commute and didn't share my new address with my mother. I sent her my new phone number with a brief message that I was doing well, and that's when the real distance began. For the next 5 years, our contact consisted mainly of short calls on holidays and birthdays. Sometimes months would pass without communication. Tyler, now working sporadically at a warehouse, never called unless he wanted something. I learned to dread the sight of my hometown's area code on my caller ID. The space and time allowed me to begin healing. I started therapy, made friends at work, built a life that was entirely my own. For the first time, I felt free from the weight of being the family provider. I just had no idea that this freedom was temporary, and that my past was about to come crashing back into my carefully constructed new life. The 5 years after college were transformative. I started at Marshall Marketing Associates as an assistant account manager making $42,000 a year, not much in Chicago, but it was a foot in the door of an industry I loved. I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with Rachel for the first 2 years before moving into my own studio. Every spare dollar went toward my student loans, which totaled just over $60,000. I worked longer hours than most of my colleagues, volunteered for challenging projects, and steadily climbed the company ladder. Associate account manager, then senior account manager. Each promotion came with more responsibility and modest salary increases. By year 4, I was making $65,000 and had paid off about a third of my student loans. While building my career, I was also building something just as important, a chosen family. Rachel remained my closest friend, and through her, I met Jasmine, a graphic designer with a wicked sense of humor who quickly became part of our inner circle. The 3 of us had a standing Sunday brunch date where we'd talk about everything from workplace drama to dating disasters to our hopes for the future. It was Jasmine who first suggested I try therapy. "You flinch when people raise their voices," she observed gently after a heated argument at a neighboring restaurant table had made me visibly uncomfortable. "And you apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. I think you're carrying some stuff, Megan." She recommended her therapist, Dr. Chen, who specialized in family trauma. Those weekly sessions became another cornerstone of my new life. Slowly, I began to unpack the patterns of my childhood, the constant expectation of sacrifice, the ingrained belief that my worth was tied to what I could provide others, the deep-seated fear of abandonment that made setting boundaries feel like a death sentence. "You're not responsible for your mother's choices or your brother's lifestyle, Dr. Chen would remind me. You deserve to prioritize your own well-being." These were revolutionary concepts for someone who'd been conditioned since childhood to put family needs above my own survival. The work was painful but necessary, and gradually, I developed healthier perspectives on family, obligation, and self-worth. My contact with my biological family remained minimal during this time. Occasional phone calls with my mother usually ended with thinly veiled requests for money, which I'd learned to deflect. Tyler rarely communicated directly, though my mother often cited his various needs when asking for family support. I maintained a polite distance from most extended family members, with the exception of my cousin Stephanie, who had moved to Indianapolis and occasionally visited Chicago. Stephanie and I had reconnected through social media a couple of years after I graduated. Our relationship had evolved from the close childhood bond we'd once shared into a more casual adult friendship. She'd call every few weeks, and we'd catch up on our lives. I was careful about how much I shared, but I did consider her the one family member I still trusted, a grave miscalculation, as I would later discover. The big breakthrough in my career came almost exactly 5 years after I started at Marshall Marketing. Our team had landed a major account with a national retail chain, and my work on the pitch had caught the attention of the executive team. 2 weeks after the successful presentation, my boss called me into his office. "We're creating a senior marketing director position to handle the new national accounts," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "We'd like you to take it." I opened the folder to find an offer letter with a salary that made me dizzy, $110,000 plus bonuses. More than double what I'd made just 2 years earlier. For someone who had grown up counting pennies and stretching dollars, the number seemed almost fictional. "Take the weekend to think about it," my boss said, smiling at my shocked expression. "Though I hope the answer is yes." That night, Rachel and Jasmine took me out to celebrate. Over expensive cocktails, a rare splurge, I shared my plans for the money. "First, I'm paying off the rest of my student loans," I said, raising my glass. "Then I'm starting to save for a down payment on a condo. And I'm maxing out my 401k contributions." "Such a responsible adult," Jasmine teased, but her eyes were proud. "After years of struggling, I finally feel like I can breathe," I admitted. "Like I'm standing on solid ground for the first time." The following Monday, I accepted the position. That evening, flush with excitement, I made a fateful mistake. I called Stephanie. "That's amazing, Meg," she exclaimed after I shared my news. "You've worked so hard for this. You deserve every penny." It felt good to have family acknowledge my achievement, something I'd never experienced growing up. We talked for almost an hour, discussing my promotion and her recent breakup. Before we hung up, I made one request. "Please don't mention the promotion or the salary to Mom or Tyler," I said. "You know how they can be about money." "Of course not," Stephanie assured me. "That's your business to share or not share. Your secrets are always safe with me." I believed her. After all, she'd been there during my childhood. She'd witnessed the dynamics firsthand. She understood why I kept my distance. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that Stephanie had remained much closer to my mother than she'd led me to believe. They spoke weekly. She visited when she went home to Ohio. She was firmly entrenched in the family information network I'd carefully extracted myself from. And most crucially, she still subscribed to the family philosophy that blood trumped all other considerations, including promises made to a cousin who trusted her. 3 weeks after my promotion, that trust would be shattered along with the peace I'd worked so hard to build. The knocking started at 9:37 a.m. on a Saturday. I remember checking the time because I'd slept in and was enjoying a rare lazy morning with coffee and a novel. The sound was insistent, almost aggressive, not the polite tap of a delivery person or neighbor. When I opened the door, still in my pajamas, the shock nearly knocked me over. Standing in my hallway, looking 5 years older but unmistakably herself, was my mother. Beside her, sporting an entitled smirk and designer clothes he couldn't possibly afford, was Tyler. Finally, my mother said, pushing past me into my apartment. "We've been knocking for ages." I stood frozen, coffee mug clutched in my suddenly trembling hand, as they entered my space, the sanctuary I'd created far from their chaos. My throat tightened, my heart racing as the panic response I'd worked so hard to overcome in therapy came rushing back. How did you find my address?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother was already inspecting my apartment, eyes cataloging my belongings as if assessing their value. "Stephanie mentioned you lived in this building. We asked around until we found your unit." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Stephanie had not only told them about my promotion but had given them enough information to track me down. The cousin I thought I could trust had handed my privacy over to the very people I'd been protecting myself from. "Nice place," Tyler commented, flopping onto my couch and putting his feet on my coffee table. At 28, he still had the mannerisms of a teenager, entitled and oblivious. "Though I expected something fancier with your big salary." "You need to leave," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You can't just show up here unannounced." My mother turned to face me, her expression shifting into the manipulative concern I remembered all too well. "Is that any way to greet your family? We haven't seen you in years, Megan." "Years?" And this is how you welcome us? I didn't welcome you at all, I pointed out. You showed up without asking and pushed your way in. Because you've been avoiding us. She crossed her arms, her voice rising. Your own mother. While you've been living the high life in Chicago, we've been struggling. And now we find out from Stephanie that you got some fancy promotion and you're making 6 figures. 6 figures, Megan. And you couldn't even call to tell us? The familiar guilt began to creep in, but 5 years of therapy had given me tools to recognize the manipulation. My career and my finances are my business. Now please leave. That's when she dropped the bomb that would shatter what remained of my composure. I know you make 6 figures now. Your brother needs a new car and I need money for the house. Family helps family. It wasn't just the demand that stunned me, it was the absolute certainty in her voice that she had a right to my money. That after years of no contact, she could walk into my home and claim the fruits of my hard work simply because we shared DNA. Tyler's car broke down last month, she continued, her tone making it clear this was a tragedy of epic proportions. He needs something reliable for work. At least $30,000 for a decent used car. Tyler nodded solemnly, though I noticed he was texting someone while pretending to listen. And the house needs a new roof. That's another $15,000, my mother added. Plus, I thought we could set up a monthly arrangement. $1,000 or so each month would really help us catch up on bills. The audacity was breathtaking. In the span of 2 minutes, they'd laid claim to more than half of my annual take-home pay. That's not happening, I said, my voice stronger now as indignation began to replace shock. I have my own expenses. Student loans. Retirement savings. My mother's face hardened. After all I've done for you? I raised you alone after your father abandoned us. I kept a roof over your head. I sacrificed everything for you kids. The revisionist history was so blatant I almost laughed. Mom, I worked from age 14 to help pay household bills while Tyler got everything he wanted. I paid my own way through college. You didn't even come when I had emergency surgery. Here we go with the martyrdom, Tyler interjected, rolling his eyes. Always thinking you're better than family. This isn't about being better than anyone, I replied, fighting to keep my voice level. This is about boundaries. You can't disappear from my life and then show up expecting handouts. My mother's expression turned ugly. Boundaries? Is that what your fancy therapist teaches you? To turn your back on family? To hoard your money while your mother and brother struggle? The fact that she knew I was in therapy was another violation, more information Stephanie must have shared. The room felt like it was closing in on me. My carefully constructed life, my hard-won peace, my sense of safety in my own home, all of it was crumbling under the toxic cloud they'd brought with them. I think you should leave, I repeated, moving toward the door. We're not going anywhere until you agree to help your family, my mother declared, planting herself firmly on my couch. Something in me snapped. Perhaps it was years of therapy giving me strength, or perhaps it was simply the outrageous entitlement on display. Whatever the cause, I found myself saying words I'd rehearsed in therapy but never thought I'd have the courage to speak aloud. This isn't a negotiation. You are in my home uninvited. Either you leave now, or I'll call building security. My mother's face registered shock, then fury. You would call security on your own mother? Yes, I said simply, picking up my phone. After everything I've done for you? Her voice rose to a shriek that had me flinching despite myself. This is how you repay me? By threatening to have me thrown out like garbage? Tyler finally looked up from his phone, his expression darkening. You've always been selfish, Megan. Always thinking you're too good for us. I took a deep breath and dialed the building's front desk. Hi, this is Megan Campbell in 803. I have unwelcome visitors who are refusing to leave. Could you please send security up? I kept my eyes locked with my mother's as I spoke. What followed was a humiliating scene I can still hardly bear to recall. My mother alternated between raging and crying as she and Tyler were escorted from the building by two security guards. Neighbors peeked from their doorways as my family drama played out in the hallway for all to see. "You'll regret this," my mother shouted as the elevator doors closed. "Don't come crawling back when you need your family." I closed the door and slid down against it onto the floor, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and emotion. The quiet apartment that had been my sanctuary now felt violated. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, "Your father would be ashamed of you." I dragged myself to the bathroom and locked the door, as if putting another barrier between myself and the chaos might help. That's where I found myself when this story began, hiding in my own bathroom, trying not to hyperventilate while processing what had just happened. Little did I know, this confrontation was just the beginning. The real storm was yet to come. I know many of you watching have faced similar confrontations with entitled family members. It's one of the hardest positions to be in, standing your ground while being called selfish by the very people trying to take advantage of you. If you've been there, let me know in the comments. And stay with me, because what happened next showed me exactly who in my life I could really count on. After my mother and Tyler left, I remained on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours. My phone kept buzzing with texts and calls from my mother, each message more manipulative than the last. I finally turned it off, unable to bear the emotional onslaught. When I finally emerged, I called Rachel. Her response was immediate, "I'm coming over. Don't argue. I'll bring wine." 30 minutes later, Rachel was at my door with a bottle of red and a fierce protective energy that made me burst into tears the moment I saw her. "They just showed up," I sobbed as she guided me to the couch. "They acted like they had a right to be here, a right to my money." Rachel listened as I recounted the entire confrontation, her expression growing increasingly outraged. "And Stephanie told them where you live?" she asked, incredulous. "After you specifically asked her not to tell them about your promotion?" "She must have. There's no other way they could have known." "That's a serious violation of trust," Rachel said, pouring us each a generous glass of wine. "Have you talked to her yet?" I hadn't, but as if summoned by our conversation, my phone, which I'd reluctantly turned back on, buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Hey, heard your mom and Tyler stopped by. Hope it went okay. They're going through a rough patch right now." The casual tone, as if she hadn't just betrayed years of trust, made my stomach turn. With shaking fingers, I typed back, "You told them about my promotion and where I live after I specifically asked you not to. That wasn't your information to share." Her response came quickly, "They're still your family, Meg. And they're struggling. I thought you should reconnect. Their blood after all." The familiar refrain, "their family, their blood," had lost all power over me in that moment. "Blood doesn't give them the right to demand my money or invade my privacy," I replied. "And it doesn't give you the right to share my personal information against my wishes." What followed was a lengthy text exchange that left me even more devastated. Stephanie admitted she had not only told my mother about my promotion and salary but had been keeping her updated about my life for years. She'd shared my address months ago. She'd mentioned my therapy. She'd even shown my mother photos of my apartment from her last visit. "They're still your family," she kept insisting. "Family should help each other." "Did you tell them to help me when I was working through college?" I asked. "Did you tell them to help me when I was in the hospital alone? Or does this family helps family philosophy only apply when I'm the one expected to give?" Her response was telling, "That's different." I ended the conversation by telling Stephanie I needed space and would not be in contact for the foreseeable future. Her final message, "You're overreacting. Family is all we have in the end," confirmed that cutting ties was the right decision. Rachel sat beside me through the whole exchange, occasionally offering supportive comments or refilling my wine glass. When I finally put the phone down, she squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing. Both with them and with Stephanie." But the nightmare was just beginning. Over the next few days, my phone exploded with messages from extended family members. It seemed my mother had launched a full-scale campaign to paint me as an ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her struggling family despite having more money than she knows what to do with. Uncle Jeff, my mother's brother, sent a particularly hurtful message: "Your mother raised you alone after your father left. The least you could do is help her now that you're successful. I thought we raised you better than this." The barrage was overwhelming. Each message poked at my deepest insecurities. That setting boundaries made me selfish, that financial success obligated me to those who had never supported me, that blood ties trumped all other considerations regardless of how I'd been treated. Rachel stayed with me that night, concerned about my mental state. The next morning, she helped me take practical steps to secure my space and peace of mind. We contacted the building management to ensure my family members would not be allowed entry again. We changed the locks on my apartment door as an extra precaution. I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Chen. "What you're experiencing is a coordinated assault on your boundaries," Dr. Chen told me during our session. "The flying monkeys, the family members contacting you on your mother's behalf, are a classic tactic used by manipulative individuals when direct control fails." The term "flying monkeys" made me smile despite everything, a perfect description of the relatives who were suddenly invested in my relationship with my mother after years of silence. I took a few days off work, unable to focus and constantly anxious about what might happen next. My boss was understanding when I explained I was dealing with a family emergency, though I kept the details vague. On the third day of my impromptu leave, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Cautiously, I answered. "Megan? It's Aunt Diane." Diane was my mother's younger sister, someone I'd always liked but had lost touch with over the years. Unlike my mother, Diane had pursued education, becoming a nurse practitioner and moving to Columbus. She had always been kind to me, though our contact had been limited by distance and my general withdrawal from family gatherings. "I heard what happened," she said once I confirmed I was on the line. "I wanted you to know that not everyone in the family believes the story your mother is telling." I sank onto my couch, relief washing over me at having at least one family ally. "Thank you for calling, Aunt Diane. It's been intense." "I can imagine. Listen, I know what Elaine is like. I grew up with her, remember? What she's doing, showing up unannounced, demanding money, then rallying the family against you when you refuse, it's not okay. I wanted you to know that." We talked for nearly an hour. Diane shared insights about my mother's behavior patterns that helped contextualize my childhood experiences. She also revealed something I hadn't known: my mother had done something similar to her years ago, attempting to extract money after Diane received a significant raise at work. "She's always had this idea that family money is communal property, but only flowing toward her," Diane explained. "When I refused to loan her $5,000 for a vacation she was planning, she didn't speak to me for 2 years. Then one day she called like nothing had happened, asking for a different favor." The conversation with Diane was validating but also concerning. If this was a pattern, my mother was unlikely to give up easily. Her need for drama and control, combined with her belief that she was entitled to my money, meant this confrontation was probably just the opening salvo in what would be a prolonged campaign. I was right to be worried. The very next day, as I was finally returning to work, I received a text from a coworker: "Your brother's here asking for you. Security is with him, but thought you should know." Tyler had shown up at my workplace, creating a scene in the lobby and demanding to speak with me. According to my colleague, he was telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned my family and needed to be reminded of my obligations. Security escorted him out, but the damage was done. Colleagues were curious. Rumors began to circulate. My carefully separated personal and professional lives had collided in the most mortifying way possible. I was called into my boss's office that afternoon. "Is everything okay, Megan? This seems unusual." I gave him a sanitized version of events, emphasizing that I was handling the situation and it wouldn't affect my work. He was supportive but concerned, particularly when I mentioned that my family had my workplace information. Let security know if you're expecting any more visits, he said carefully. And Megan? Take care of yourself. The new position is demanding enough without family drama. The next blow came 2 days later when HR called me in. My mother had contacted them directly, claiming I was experiencing mental health issues and making concerning financial decisions that might affect my job performance. The HR director, a kind woman named Janet who had known me for 5 years, didn't take the claim seriously but was obligated to follow up. I've worked with you long enough to know this isn't true, she assured me. But I wanted to make you aware of the contact. The invasion into my professional life was the final straw. It was time to take more serious action to protect the life I'd built. The attacks continued to escalate in ways I never could have imagined. What had begun as an unwanted visit had morphed into a multi-front assault on my reputation, my career, and my peace of mind. One evening after work, I received a call from Jasmine. "Have you been on Facebook today?" she asked, her tone unusually serious. I hadn't. Between work stress and family drama, social media had been the last thing on my mind. "Your mother is posting about you," Jasmine said gently. "It's not good, Megan." I logged in to find my newsfeed filled with lengthy posts from my mother, detailing how her successful daughter in Chicago had forgotten her roots and abandoned her struggling family. She described herself as a selfless single mother who had sacrificed everything for her children, only to be cast aside once I made it big. The posts included childhood photos of me she'd dug up from somewhere, creating a narrative of a once-loving daughter who had been corrupted by money and city life. The posts had dozens of comments from extended family and hometown acquaintances, most expressing sympathy for my mother and disapproval of my supposed behavior. A few even tagged me directly, demanding I do right by my mother. "This is a nightmare," I whispered to Jasmine on the phone. "She's turning everyone against me with lies." "Not everyone," Jasmine corrected firmly. "The people who know you, really know you, won't believe this garbage." Still, the public smear campaign was effective with those who only knew one side of the story. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years sent me private messages expressing their disappointment. Former high school classmates I'd long lost touch with weighed in on my character. The digital pile-on was overwhelming. I set my social media accounts to private and blocked my mother and Tyler, but screenshots of her posts continued to arrive from well-meaning friends. "Thought you should see what she's saying now," these messages would begin, followed by more outrageous claims about my supposed wealth and selfishness. Then came the GoFundMe page. A former neighbor sent me the link, "Help single mom Elaine and son Tyler after abandonment." The page featured a photo of my mother looking appropriately downtrodden, alongside a younger picture of me. The description detailed financial hardships supposedly caused by my withdrawal of support, including the risk of losing their family home and Tyler's inability to find reliable transportation to his job. "We never wanted to make this public," my mother wrote in the description, "but after Megan refused to help despite her 6-figure salary in Chicago, we have nowhere else to turn." The fundraiser had already collected over $2,000 from sympathetic donors who had no idea of the true situation. My name and altered details of my life were being used to solicit money under false pretenses. I felt sick reading the comments, "Praying for you, Elaine. Some people forget where they came from. Can't believe a daughter would do this to her own mother. What goes around comes around." The invasion of my workplace wasn't over either. Tyler showed up twice more, each time being escorted out by security. Colleagues were now openly gossiping about my family situation. I overheard conversations stopping abruptly when I entered the break room. My professional reputation, built on 5 years of hard work and reliability, was being undermined by family drama I had tried so hard to escape. The final straw came when my landlord called me into the leasing office. "Ms. Campbell, we've received some concerning information about unauthorized residents in your unit." Confused, I asked what he meant. "Someone claiming to be your mother called to report that you've been subletting your apartment illegally. She said you've been charging rent to multiple people not on the lease." The accusation was absurd. I lived alone and had never sublet my apartment. But the claim was serious enough that management had to investigate, requiring me to provide documentation and references to prove I was in compliance with my lease. It was becoming clear that my mother and Tyler would stop at nothing to either extract money from me or punish me for refusing. The attacks were coordinated, escalating, and aimed at the foundations of my life, my home, my job, my reputation, and my peace of mind. That night, after yet another harassing phone call from an unknown number, which I strongly suspected was Tyler using a friend's phone, I made a decision. This wasn't going to stop without intervention. I needed legal help. The next morning, I researched attorneys specializing in harassment cases and made an appointment with Sarah Goldstein, who had excellent reviews and experience with family legal issues. 2 days later, I sat in her office explaining the situation. "This is more common than you might think," Sarah assured me after hearing the whole story. "Family estrangement is difficult, and when money becomes involved, things often escalate." "What can I do?" I asked, feeling both desperate and determined. "They're affecting my job, my housing, my reputation." "We have several options," Sarah explained. "First, we can send cease and desist letters, though those aren't always effective with family members who feel entitled to contact. More significantly, we can file for restraining orders based on the harassment you're experiencing. The workplace incidents alone would likely qualify." The idea of taking legal action against my own mother and brother was surreal, but I was out of alternatives. "What do I need to do?" "Document everything," Sarah advised. "Every call, text, email, social media post. The GoFundMe page is particularly problematic as it uses your name and potentially defamatory claims to solicit money. Screenshot everything. Record dates and times of workplace incidents. Get statements from coworkers who witnessed your brother's behavior if possible." I spent the next week gathering evidence. The volume of harassment was staggering when compiled in one place: dozens of texts, emails, and social media posts, the fraudulent GoFundMe, the false reports to my workplace and landlord, the multiple unwanted visits. Together, it painted a clear picture of coordinated harassment designed to either force compliance or punish resistance. The process was emotionally exhausting. Each message I documented reopened wounds, each false accusation stoked my anxiety. But beneath the hurt, a steely resolve was forming. I had spent years in therapy learning that I deserved boundaries, that I wasn't responsible for my family's choices, that my success wasn't a resource for them to exploit. Now it was time to put those lessons into action. "You're doing the right thing," Rachel assured me as she helped organize the documentation. "This isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting yourself." With Sarah's guidance, I prepared to file for restraining orders against both my mother and Tyler. The legal process would be challenging, but for the first time since they had reappeared in my life, I felt a sense of agency. I was no longer simply reacting to their attacks, I was taking proactive steps to defend the life I had built. What I didn't realize was that the evidence-gathering process would uncover even more shocking revelations about my family, truths that would reframe not just the current conflict, but my entire understanding of my childhood. 2 days before my scheduled court hearing, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Usually, I would have let unknown numbers go to voicemail given the harassment I'd been experiencing, but something made me answer this one. "Is this Megan Campbell?" a female voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" I replied cautiously. "You don't know me, but I'm Jessica Miller. I dated your brother Tyler for about a year until 3 months ago. I saw the GoFundMe page your mom set up, and there are things you should know." I sat down, my heart pounding. "I'm listening." Jessica's story was nothing short of revelatory. She had met Tyler at a local bar in our hometown and dated him from early 2024 until just a few months ago. During that time, she had become well acquainted with my mother and the stories she told about me. "Your mom told everyone you sent money home regularly," Jessica explained. "She'd say things like Megan's monthly contribution came through or Megan sent extra this month for Tyler's birthday. But I never saw evidence of actual money from you." According to Jessica, my mother had been maintaining a fiction for years that I was financially supporting the family from Chicago. When bills were paid or new purchases appeared, credit was often given to my supposed generosity. I started getting suspicious when the stories didn't add up, Jessica continued. Tyler would complain that you never helped them, but then your mom would mention money you supposedly sent. When I asked questions, they'd get defensive or change the subject. The most shocking revelation came next. About 6 months into our relationship, I was helping Tyler look for some paperwork in the home office when I found documents from your grandparents' estate. There was a letter addressed to you about a bequest, around $20,000 they left specifically to you. The envelope had been opened, but I doubt you ever saw it. My grandparents, my father's parents, had both passed away during my sophomore year of college. I had been told they left small mementos to my brother and me, but nothing of significant value. The idea that they had left me money I never received was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Why are you telling me this now? I asked Jessica. I saw the GoFundMe and the social media posts. It's all lies, Megan. Your mom and Tyler have been lying about you for years, and now they're trying to publicly shame you into giving them money. It's not right. After thanking Jessica for her courage in reaching out, I immediately called my attorney to share this new information. Sarah advised me to see if Jessica would be willing to provide a written statement or potentially testify if necessary. Jessica agreed without hesitation. That evening, I received another unexpected call, this time from Uncle Jeff, the same uncle who had sent me a scathing message just days earlier. Megan, it's your Uncle Jeff. I owe you an apology. His voice sounded different, subdued, even ashamed. I saw Elaine's GoFundMe page and something didn't feel right. The numbers she was claiming, the way she was portraying everything, it didn't match what I knew about you. Jeff explained that he had called my mother directly to ask more questions about the situation and her answers had been evasive and inconsistent. Concerned, he had started reaching out to other family members and discovered he wasn't the only one with doubts. I spoke with Diane yesterday, he continued. She told me about similar experiences she's had with your mother over money. Then I started looking more closely at some of the claims Elaine's been making about financial hardship. What Jeff discovered was troubling. My mother's supposed financial crisis wasn't entirely due to necessary expenses. There were significant cash withdrawals at a local casino over the past few years. Credit card statements showed luxury purchases that contradicted her claims of struggling to afford basics. I think your mother may have a gambling problem, Jeff said quietly. And I think she's been hiding it from the family while using you as both a supposed source of income and a scapegoat when money was tight. As for Tyler, Jeff had reluctantly come to realize that my brother's financial issues were largely self-inflicted. Tyler had recently received his third DUI, resulting in substantial legal fees and the loss of his driver's license. The real reason he needed a reliable car was that his previous vehicle had been impounded. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, Jeff said. And I'm especially sorry for that message I sent you. I was reacting based on what Elaine told me without questioning it. By the time we ended our call, Jeff had offered to provide a statement for my court hearing and to speak with other family members about what he had discovered. His support was unexpected but deeply appreciated. The next morning brought yet another surprise. An email appeared in my inbox from a name I hadn't seen in years, Madison Wilcox, a childhood friend who had lived next door to us until we were 15. I saw your mom's posts about you, Madison wrote. I don't know if you remember me, but I wanted to reach out because what she's saying doesn't match the Elaine Campbell I knew growing up. Madison went on to describe memories of my mother's favoritism toward Tyler, instances when I had been forced to miss social events to work while Tyler was given freedom and resources, and the constant narrative in our house that my achievements were expected while Tyler's minimal efforts were celebrated. I remember when you got that scholarship in high school, Madison wrote. Your mom barely acknowledged it, but threw a huge party when Tyler's football team won a regular season game. It always bothered me how differently you were treated. Like Jessica and Jeff, Madison offered to provide a written statement about her observations of our family dynamics. She also mentioned several other former neighbors and family friends who had expressed skepticism about my mother's portrayal of events. By the day of the court hearing, I had assembled an unexpected coalition of support, people from different periods of my life who had witnessed the truth of my family's situation and were willing to speak up about it. My attorney was confident that between their statements and the extensive documentation of harassment, we had a strong case for the restraining orders. Aunt Diane called the night before the hearing. "I'll be there tomorrow," she said firmly. "You shouldn't have to face this alone." "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I can't tell you what that means to me." "Family should support each other," Diane replied. "Real support, not the kind Elaine talks about that only flows in her direction. I should have been there for you more when you were growing up. I saw what was happening, but I didn't do enough. I'm trying to do better now." As I prepared for court the next day, I reflected on how this crisis had unexpectedly revealed who my true allies were. People I had thought lost to me, like Uncle Jeff, had stepped up when they recognized the truth. Others I had never expected support from, like Jessica, had shown remarkable courage in coming forward. The painful exposure of family secrets had been devastating in many ways, but it had also brought clarity. For years, I had carried the weight of being the selfish one, the one who abandoned family. Now I could see that narrative for what it was, a convenient fiction created to hide troubling truths and maintain a system of exploitation. The revelation about my grandparents' bequest was particularly painful. I had loved my grandparents dearly, and the thought that they had tried to help me even after death, only to have that final gift intercepted, brought fresh grief. But it also confirmed what I had always sensed: there had been people in my family who saw my worth, who wanted to support my independence rather than exploit it. As difficult as the coming court confrontation would be, I felt stronger knowing I wasn't facing it alone. The truth was finally emerging, and with it came not just vindication, but also genuine support from unexpected sources. I know many of you have experienced similar revelations about family members, finding out that people weren't who you thought they were, or discovering allies where you least expected them. These turning points can be both heartbreaking and liberating. If you've had a moment when family secrets suddenly came to light, share your experience in the comments. And stay with me to see what happened when we finally had our day in court. The morning of the hearing arrived with a mixture of dread and determination settling in my stomach. I had barely slept, running through potential scenarios in my mind. Would my mother create a scene? Would Tyler behave aggressively? Would the judge believe my evidence? I met Sarah at her office an hour before the scheduled hearing to review our strategy one last time. "Remember," she advised, "stick to the facts. Don't get drawn into emotional arguments. The documentation speaks for itself." When we arrived at the courthouse, I was surprised to see Aunt Diane already waiting in the lobby. She hugged me tightly. "I've got your back," she whispered. Rachel and Jasmine arrived moments later, followed by Uncle Jeff, who nodded solemnly in greeting. Jessica Miller, Tyler's ex-girlfriend, approached nervously. "I've never done anything like this before," she admitted. "But what they're doing to you isn't right." Even Madison had made the trip from Cleveland to provide support and testimony if needed. The show of solidarity was overwhelming, especially after weeks of feeling isolated by my mother's campaign against me. As we entered the courtroom, I spotted my mother and Tyler seated on the other side. My mother had dressed in what I recognized as her church clothes, conservative attire she reserved for occasions when appearances mattered. Tyler, surprisingly, wore a button-up shirt instead of his usual t-shirts. Their attorney, a stern-looking man in his 50s, sat between them. My mother's eyes widened when she saw the group accompanying me. I could almost see her mental calculations shifting as she registered Uncle Jeff and Aunt Diane among my supporters. The hearing began with Sarah presenting our case for the restraining orders. She methodically outlined the pattern of harassment, the unwanted visits, the workplace intrusions, the defamatory social media campaigns, the false reports to my employer and landlord, and the fraudulent GoFundMe page. Ms. Campbell has made repeated requests for contact to cease, Sarah explained to the judge. Instead of respecting those boundaries, The respondents have escalated their behavior in ways that threaten my client's housing, employment, and reputation. My mother's attorney argued that family disputes shouldn't be resolved through legal means, painting the situation as a simple misunderstanding between a mother and daughter. Mrs. Campbell was merely attempting to reconnect with her daughter after a period of estrangement, he claimed. Any mother would be concerned about a child who cuts off contact. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, seemed unimpressed by this characterization. Reconnecting doesn't typically involve showing up at someone's workplace or filing false reports with their landlord, she observed. When it was time for testimony, I took the stand first, describing the years of favoritism, the financial exploitation during my youth, the minimal contact in recent years, and then the sudden reappearance and demands for money after my promotion. My mother's attorney attempted to paint me as cold and ungrateful during cross-examination. Isn't it true that your mother sacrificed to raise you after your father left? He asked. My mother focused her resources on my brother while requiring me to work from age 14 to contribute to household expenses, I replied steadily. I paid my own way through college without family support. And yet now that you're successful, you refuse to help your struggling family? Sarah objected to the characterization, and the judge sustained it. I took a deep breath and responded anyway. I built my career through hard work and sacrifice, without family support. My mother and brother showed up unannounced at my home demanding tens of thousands of dollars, not asking for reasonable help. Jessica's testimony about the years of lies regarding my supposed financial contributions was particularly damaging to my mother's case. She described in detail the contradictory stories my mother had told about money I had allegedly sent home, as well as her discovery of the intercepted inheritance letter from my grandparents. My mother's face darkened with each revelation. When Jessica mentioned the inheritance, I saw Tyler turn to my mother with a confused expression. Apparently, that particular deception had been kept from him as well. Uncle Jeff's testimony about my mother's gambling and financial mismanagement provided crucial context for the court. He described his own investigation into the situation after initially believing my mother's version of events, and how the evidence had led him to recognize the manipulation at play. Elaine has been using Megan as both a supposed source of funds and a scapegoat for years, Jeff explained. When I questioned the narrative, I discovered substantial casino withdrawals and luxury purchases that contradicted her claims of financial hardship. Throughout the testimonies, I watched my mother's composed victim facade gradually crumble. Her attorney attempted to object to certain statements, but much of the evidence was admissible and compelling. When my mother took the stand, her strategy became clear immediately: play the heartbroken, abandoned mother who only wanted to reconnect with her successful daughter. I just wanted to be part of Megan's life again, she said, voice quavering. Is it so wrong for a mother to ask her successful daughter for help when times are hard? But under cross-examination by Sarah, the contradictions in her story began to emerge. She couldn't explain why reconnecting required showing up unannounced rather than calling first. She struggled to justify contacting my employer with false claims about my mental health. When confronted with the evidence of her casino visits, she became defensive and evasive. Those were occasional recreational outings, she insisted, though the bank statements Sarah presented suggested otherwise. The most damaging moment came when Sarah asked about the inheritance from my grandparents. Did you intercept correspondence intended for Ms. Campbell regarding a bequest from her grandparents? I don't recall any such letter, my mother replied stiffly. Your Honor, I'd like to enter this into evidence, Sarah said, producing a copy of the estate document Jessica had helped us obtain through the probate court. This confirms a bequest of $20,000 specifically to Megan Campbell. The executor's records show the check was mailed to Mrs. Elaine Campbell's address while Ms. Campbell was away at college. My mother's face went pale. I might have handled some mail for Megan during that time. There were so many documents after my in-laws passed. And did you inform Ms. Campbell about this inheritance? I may have forgotten in the stress of the situation. The judge's expression made it clear she found this explanation less than credible. Tyler's testimony was brief and largely ineffective. He repeated claims about family loyalty and obligation but became combative when Sarah questioned him about his DUIs and employment history. His assertion that I had always thought I was better than the family drew an audible sigh from the judge. After all testimony concluded, the judge took only a brief recess before returning with her decision. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to grant the restraining orders against both respondents, she announced. Mrs. Campbell and Mr. Campbell are to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from the petitioner, her home, and her place of employment. They are forbidden from contacting her directly or through third parties, including via phone, email, social media, or any other means. They are specifically prohibited from making public statements using the petitioner's name, image, or personal information. These orders will remain in effect for 2 years, at which time the petitioner may apply for an extension if necessary. She looked directly at my mother. Mrs. Campbell, I strongly suggest you take this opportunity to respect your daughter's boundaries and seek appropriate help for the issues that have been revealed in this hearing. My mother's response was to stand up and point at me, her face contorted with rage. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By humiliating me in court? Mrs. Campbell, the judge warned sharply, outbursts like that only reinforce the need for these orders. Security officers moved closer as my mother continued her tirade. You think you're better than us now with your fancy job and city apartment. You'll regret this, Megan. Family is forever, whether you like it or not. As she was escorted from the courtroom, still shouting, I sat frozen in my chair. Despite all the evidence, despite the restraining orders, part of me had still hoped for some acknowledgement from her, some recognition of the harm she had caused, some sign that beneath it all was a mother who truly cared about my well-being rather than what I could provide. That final outburst, focused entirely on her humiliation rather than the pain she had caused me, extinguished that hope. This had never been about family connection, it had always been about control and exploitation. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by the unlikely support system that had formed around me, I felt strangely hollow. The restraining orders were necessary protection, but they couldn't heal the deeper wounds of having a mother who saw me as a resource rather than a daughter. You did the right thing, Aunt Diane assured me, seeing my expression. Sometimes the hardest boundaries are the ones we need most. In the days that followed, the tangible effects of the court victory became clear. The GoFundMe page was taken down after being reported for fraud. My HR department, now fully aware of the situation, implemented additional security protocols to protect me at work. My landlord, presented with the court documentation, apologized for the intrusion and assured me my housing was secure. But the emotional impact was more complicated. I had won in court, but the victory felt empty in many ways. The family I had once known, however dysfunctional, was now legally separated from me. The fantasy I had occasionally indulged, that someday my mother might recognize my worth beyond my utility, had been definitively shattered. That evening, alone in my apartment, I called Dr. Chen and scheduled an emergency session. I got everything I asked for today, I told her, so why do I feel so bereft? Because legal victory doesn't heal emotional wounds, she replied gently. You're grieving the family you deserved but never had. That's a profound loss, Megan, and it's okay to feel it deeply, even while knowing you've made the right choice for your well-being. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this chapter of confrontation might be ending, but the journey of healing was just beginning. The truth had been exposed, boundaries established, and allies discovered. Now came the harder part, building a future that wasn't defined by the past, one where family was chosen rather than imposed, and where my worth wasn't tied to what I could provide others. 1 year later. The security system chimed softly as I entered my new condo, grocery bags balanced precariously in both arms. I nudged the door closed with my hip and smiled at the sound of the automatic locks engaging. It was a small thing, that beep, but it represented something profound: safety, security, a space that was truly my own. In the year since the court hearing, my life had transformed in ways both practical and profound. The promotion that had inadvertently triggered the family crisis had led to further advancement at work. My performance had impressed the executive team, and 6 months ago I'd been offered the role of marketing operations director, with another significant salary increase. The first major decision I made after the restraining orders were granted was to move. Though my apartment had been secured with new locks and building management was aware of the situation, too many painful memories lingered in those rooms. I spent several months researching neighborhoods and saving aggressively before finding this perfect two-bedroom condo in a secure building with a doorman. Rachel teased me about the fortress of solitude as she called it, but she understood the peace of mind it gave me. After what you went through, you deserve a place where you can completely relax, she'd said as she helped me unpack. Setting the groceries on the kitchen counter, I glanced at the framed photo nearby, me with Rachel, Jasmine, Aunt Diane, and surprisingly, Uncle Jeff at my condo warming party 3 months ago. My chosen family had expanded in unexpected ways since the court hearing. Aunt Diane had become a regular presence in my life, visiting Chicago every few months and calling weekly. Uncle Jeff, though more distant geographically, had made genuine efforts to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. We'd had several honest conversations about the family dynamics he had overlooked for years, and his acknowledgement of his role in enabling my mother's behavior had been healing for both of us. My therapy sessions with Dr. Chen had continued, focusing on rebuilding my sense of self-worth outside of productivity and service to others. You have value simply because you exist, she would remind me during our sessions. Not because of what you accomplish or provide. Implementing that belief in my daily life had been challenging but transformative. I'd learned to say no without guilt, to take vacation time without anxiety, to spend money on my own enjoyment without feeling selfish. Small victories in an ongoing battle against lifelong conditioning. As I put away the groceries, my phone buzzed with a text from Madison, the childhood friend who had testified at the hearing. We had rekindled a friendship in the months since, discovering we had more in common as adults than we'd realized. Still on for brunch Sunday? Her message read. Jasmine says she found a place with bottomless mimosas. I smiled as I typed back a confirmation. These ordinary social plans, brunches with friends, movie nights, weekend trips, had taken on new significance in my life. They represented connection based on mutual enjoyment rather than obligation or utility. News about my mother and Tyler still reached me occasionally, though never directly due to the restraining orders. Aunt Diane provided carefully filtered updates when she thought it important for me to know something. My mother's gambling issues had apparently come to light publicly several months after the hearing when she was caught trying to cash a fraudulent check at the casino where she was now banned. She'd avoided jail time but was required to enter a diversion program that included financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment. Tyler had finally faced consequences for his actions as well. His third DUI had resulted in a suspended license, and a subsequent arrest for driving without that license had led to actual jail time, 30 days, followed by mandatory substance abuse treatment and community service. According to Diane, the experience had been a wake-up call of sorts. He was working consistently for the first time in his life and attending AA meetings. I felt complicated emotions about these developments. Not satisfaction or schadenfreude as I might once have expected, but a quiet acknowledgement that consequences were sometimes necessary catalysts for change. Whether those changes would be lasting remained to be seen, but I no longer felt responsible for either their struggles or their redemption. Stephanie had attempted to reconnect several times in the months following the court hearing. After ignoring her first few messages, I eventually responded with a brief but firm explanation of why I couldn't resume our relationship. Trust, once broken, is extremely difficult to rebuild, I'd written. I wish you well, but I need to prioritize relationships that feel safe and supportive. Her response, family should always forgive each other, had only confirmed that keeping that distance was the right decision for my well-being. The most unexpected connection to emerge from the crisis had been with Jessica, Tyler's ex-girlfriend. Her courage in coming forward with the truth had impressed me, and we'd developed a genuine friendship in the months since. She had recently moved to Indianapolis for a new job and was thriving away from my brother's influence. Last month, a different kind of family gathering had taken place at Aunt Diane's home in Columbus, a small dinner with her, Uncle Jeff and his wife, my father's brother Uncle Mike and his family, and a few cousins from both sides who had reached out after learning the full story. It wasn't the strained, obligation-filled family events of my childhood, but something new and healthier. A gathering of adults who genuinely wanted to connect. As I sat at Diane's dinner table, surrounded by conversation and laughter, I'd felt a profound sense of reclamation. Family didn't have to mean sacrifice and emotional debt. It could be mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care. The restraining orders against my mother and Tyler would expire in another year. I hadn't decided yet whether I would seek to extend them. Part of me hoped that the time and distance had created enough change that such legal barriers might eventually become unnecessary. Another part recognized that some people never truly change their fundamental patterns, and maintaining legal protection might be an ongoing necessity. Dr. Chen had helped me recognize that this wasn't a decision I needed to make now. Boundaries can evolve, she'd reminded me. What matters is that you trust yourself to protect your well-being, whatever form that needs to take. That evening, as I settled onto my couch with a glass of wine and the book club selection I needed to finish before tomorrow's meeting, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The crisis that had seemed like the destruction of my carefully built life had instead forced me to construct something stronger, not just external security measures, but internal fortifications as well. I had learned that family wasn't defined by blood but by respect and reciprocity. That boundaries weren't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. That my worth wasn't determined by what I could provide others but was inherent and unchangeable. That forgiveness didn't necessarily mean reconciliation, and that sometimes the most compassionate thing you could do, for yourself and others, was to create distance that allowed everyone to face their own consequences and growth. The path hadn't been easy. There had been nights of doubt and grief, moments of rage and regret. The little girl inside me who still longed for a mother's unconditional love sometimes made herself known in dreams and quiet moments. But with each passing month, her voice grew gentler, less desperate. She was healing too, learning alongside adult me that we were worthy of love that didn't come with price tags attached. As I turned the page of my book, the security system chimed again, the automatic evening check that all entry points were secure. Another small sound that represented so much: I was safe, I was home, and I was finally, truly free. If my story has resonated with you, I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Did you discover unexpected support from others during challenging times? What does family mean to you now? Your insights might help others who are struggling with similar situations. Please like and subscribe if you found value in my journey. There's strength in sharing our stories and knowing we're not alone in these difficult family situations. And if someone in your life needs to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being, consider sharing this video with them. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is the one that truly helps us heal. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.